just after sunset. And this is that Valley of the Gods that I first discovered last spring, this past spring, after having passed it for the last 15 years at least. The road ahead of us winds off to the right. Wraps around those spires to the right and continues on way up to the end of the valley and then back down to the left and to the road that then goes on up to Bridges National Monument. Just some shots in Monument Valley as I pass through en route to Flagstaff. I tried to visit Fossil Springs, but it's been closed because of vandalism. I'm going to video this and read the inscription on the memorial plaque. The Strawberry School is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Built by pioneers in 1885. This one-room cabin provided elementary instruction to students until 1916. The building represents the efforts to teach the 3 R's in rural Arizona during the territorial and early statehood periods. Thanks for letting me in.
Well, I'm always back to if I don't have to hurry home or hurry someplace on my way. I live down the road at least.
Were the blackboards original? Do you know?
Just one piece up there. It shows that hard slate, but the other was just...
Okay. And this is the organ.
Well, it isn't the organ that was in here. This was closed for so long.
But nothing was...
It didn't have much say, but that organ was stored away. And
well, it's nicely restored. This is very nice.
Yeah. He was here looking in, and I just thought, when I'm not in a hurry, I just stop in and let him pitch in.
So you're the caretaker?
One of them.
That lady was kind enough to stop when she saw me outside and ask me if I would like to go inside and see. In my strange little parking space, which is just a little niche off the side of the road west of Payson, Arizona, I noticed as I was looking out the window when I paused to read that here is a spider's nest, or spider's web, but in it the spider has captured something that I can't determine, but wrapped it securely as its food larder. And then the wind apparently has caught other little features of the nest, which makes it, or I mean the web, which make it look rather pretty. And then to add some even more poignancy, there's a little red berry of some sort on what looks like a probably the least interesting place I've spent the night on this trip, but interesting and unique in its own way. To the east of Payson is Woods Canyon Lake that I visited. I stayed at Woods Canyon Lake, and I also kayaked on Willow Springs Lake, which is a beautiful little lake. This is where the Mogollon Rim gets its name. I'm up at the Woods Lake Recreational Area east of Payson, Arizona. This is an amazing area. To the east, to the west, behind me, of mountainous, but not steep mountains, but mountainous and heavily vegetated with pines. Beautiful, beautiful area. A magnificent counterpoint contrast, if you will, to the deserts of Arizona, which it's known for. It's interesting to look at the erosion dynamic of this Mogollon Rim, literally coming off in big chunks. Here's a poignant memento left for a loved but passed on mom. And this really is the lip of what amounts to a huge bench. Isn't military sinkhole an oxymoron? The facilities up here are pretty nice, particularly for those folks that are wheelchair bound, because this asphalt trail goes quite a little distance along the rim, I believe. It'd be interesting to know the uplift geology of this Mogollon Rim. Certainly from the sandstone, it's obvious it was part of the huge inland sea, but did it rise and the other areas fell? As I stand on this rock overlooking the edge, you can almost imagine that you're standing on an ancient seashore or mudflat millions of years ago. Weather's been absolutely gorgeous this fall. This is a beautiful little lake for paddling. It looked small on the map, but there's a short arm to the right, a long arm that hooks way, way down there. And then when you paddle back here and go around that point right there, it's a long arm that goes down and then hooks left into a really intimate little channel. Lots of trees, old trees sticking up because this was a dammed area, but they're kind of fun to go through. The dam is down just past those people on that point there to the left. But there are many places here where people can come, and like those older folks, and sit quietly and have a picnic and fish and absolutely enjoy the day. And on a day like today, it's real hard not to enjoy it. Saw an osprey dive. She struggled hard to get the fish out of the water, but she couldn't get it out, so she left it. It's interesting on these magnificent bluffs that people have chosen to create memorials to loved ones who've passed on. This one a relatively new one and quite securely placed to Sandra Roberts, a year younger than I was. Here, several years younger than I. And this one rather trite, but perhaps no less sincere. This one professionally prepared in natural rock. I think I just heard an elk bugling.
If I don't look down there, oh, now I'm seeing it. What'd you have for lunch? I just got some sardines and that teriyaki stuff.
You may wonder how I'm able to achieve this high level of computer graphics for these videos. This will give you a clue. I've taken an alley's map and wedged it into the towel rack on the door to the bathroom in my little van, and then sitting on the table near it, I have the camera positioned on a couple of books. This one happens to be The Art of Renaissance Venice. And that's how it's all achieved. This morning we are standing on a small knoll near Pothol's interpretive site in the Needles portion, which is the southern portion of Canyonlands National Park, which is located in Utah in what is known as the Great Basin. We are facing generally southeast, and I'll begin to rotate the camera. What you're going to see here is one of the great examples of the most significant form or effect, if you will, landform effect of tectonic movement. As you know, tectonic movement can be generally summarized as the uplifting and sometimes falling of the Earth's surface due to forces of colossal dimension inside of the Earth's surface. We're now looking generally to the west. And there where you see what's called the needles. And I'll explain how they're formed as we rotate about. This entire area that you're seeing now as we focus more towards the north was once a large inland sea, perhaps even likely called an ocean by some. This was probably 215 to 275 million years ago. As you know, seas composed of salt water, or oceans composed of salt water, when they dry up, would tend to leave, as you might imagine, a thick layer, and by that I mean several thousand feet, of salt, which is the case here. Overlaying that salt was a white-ish sandstone, which we're standing on, that was formed during the course of that period. And then another form of sandstone that you can see evidenced in the way ahead of us is a red sandstone. Now, one of the curious dynamics of salt, even when it's thousands of feet, or hundreds or thousands of feet in depth, is that under pressure of this huge rock sandstone above it, it flows, not as rapidly as water, but very similar in the same in dynamic. As a consequence, salt will flow from underneath this huge rock, leaving that rock weakened as to its support. And as a consequence, it begins to crack. Now, when it begins to crack, it then creates those cracks, those fissures, become weak spots in the rock itself. We've now made a 360, a little more than the 360 degree rotation, and we're now back looking at the needles. If you look at the needles closely, you'll realize that salt must have moved deeply underneath them, causing a multitude of cracks, vertical cracks. As a result of those cracks, water, which is rainwater, which is slightly carbonic acid, is able to eat down through these cracks and remove the sandstone in an erosion process. Here you see it most dramatically. But even in front of you, if you look not even closely, just obvious, you'll see large clumps that almost to me look like the knobs in a game pinball machine. For example, notice the several right there. These, again, are the same consequence in that water has eroded down through cracks that were formed by the flowing of salt and the weakening of the strata above. Now, the biggest and most important dynamic that I should have mentioned before is that this is a huge plateau area. Off in the distance you can see the plateaus. They offer the most spectacular views in this part of the country. This is caused by uplifting. It's the major form of uplifting. Entire, huge, 100,000 square miles, hundreds or thousand square mile areas are literally uplifted as you would lift a large 4x8 sheet of plywood over your head, unbalanced on your hand, lifting it upwards. One of the ways you can gauge how far up it was lifted is by what remains. Now notice straight ahead of us, we see that large mesa, and the mesa here. This is the north end of the park. Island in the Sky, it's called. The land has been uplifted that far. But notice below it, there's still another plateau that's much closer to us and dramatically lower. And as we scout around this part of the country, we can see that there are several levels. What has happened to that level as it's raised, the rivers, the Colorado and the Green River, have eroded down through it. And other streams and waters over the centuries have eroded the areas in between. Now we'll scan back towards the north. You can see in one place where rivers have cut through, creating that gap. And if you were to look down on the map, which we will, you would see that this whole park has been divided into three major chunks by the Colorado and the Green River. Now, one thing that occurs with the various forms of erosion is that sections will be left over that were harder than the sections around them, and that's what leaves these mesas and these buttes, and sometimes these very tight pinnacles that you see here. Now, as I rotate towards the east a little bit more, you will of course see another form of tectonic uplift. There they are. And that's mountains. We'll discuss mountains at a later time, but as dramatic as mountains tend to be in our minds, it is the uplifting of these huge plates that originally were formed from the sea that covered Canyonlands. It's that uplifting of huge plates into what we would call plateaus now that represents the most dramatic and largest, most widespread form of tectonic uplift. We are now at Pothole Point in the southern portion, or the Needles portion, of Canyonlands National Park in Utah, in what's known as the Great Basin. And what I want you to notice as I pan here is the shining bits of water on the rock surface. These are called potholes, and what they are is depressions in the sandstone rock that forms this park. Specifically, these holes are caused by rain falling on the rock, the rain containing a light solution of carbonic acid, which then breaks down the rock, forming these small pools which then hold this water. The more rain, the deeper the pools. Pools also collect mud or dirt, as you can see from the one immediately beneath me. There are two things that are important about these pools, and we'll walk over to one now. The first is that they are, for many animals, and perhaps man on occasion, absolute life-saving sources of water. And it is for that reason that man must use these potholes in the same way that animals do. Take what you need, leave the rest, and don't pollute. The second thing that's important are the various kinds of animals that live in these potholes. These animals are classic examples of living things that have learned to adapt to a critical and extremely harsh landscape. In the summer, temperatures can be 140 degrees at ground temperature. In other words, at the level of these, at the surface of these water holes or puddles. Obviously, they dry up, and what remains is mud. But that's only to the uninformed. To those of us, and you included now, that are knowledgeable, inside of these mud, in this mud, remains life forms, the eggs of life forms, that have unique abilities to adapt to this incredibly dry environment. For example, the snail is able to resist drying out and can survive dry periods as adults, in addition to the other animals that exist in egg form, waiting for water to come and then the opportunity to blossom. As we'll discover, these same attributes can be found in plants. Here are some examples, if we can read this drawing, of the kind of beings that you will find in here. A small snail to the left, tadpole shrimp, those are the two way out looking dudes to the left, and in the center a fairy shrimp, a clam shrimp, and one of the most interesting ones is down there in the right hand corner, which is called the horsehair worm, and that is a life-size depiction of that worm and of these other little animals. Now let's go and see if we can find any of those in the pool. Here's a particularly large pothole for this area. I wasn't able to find any little varmints in the other smaller pools. Let's see if there's anything in this one. If you look closely here, you will see the little snails, those little white things, or gray I should say, for example right in the upper left hand corner. And also, I don't know if you can see it, but I can see little things moving that may not be visible in the camera. Also, one of the things that we can see for sure are the tracks that go across. Probably those are the tracks of the snails. Now here we can see a whole bunch of snails. Presumably the ones that are alive are the gray color, and the ones that have already died are the white color, like the one in the upper left hand corner. And remember, it's little snails like these that may well have begun to form these here is an interesting little plant or colony of plants that lives right in the water, kind of like a seaweed or kelp. I don't know what it is though. Notice that the small snails also use it, and I wonder if it doesn't hide, although I don't intend to disturb it, I wonder if it doesn't hide some of these other animals. Isn't that a neat little place to stay hidden? What would the predators of these little animals be, I wonder? Here we see a shrimp, I think, moving along. My camera is not good enough to, and I'm not good enough a photographer to get close enough. Here's a little beetle over here. You see how he hides himself in the mud. There are other beetles that hide themselves in the mud that I've seen and look like they have two paddle wings, and all of a sudden they'll shoot up to the surface, grab some food off the surface, and then skedaddle back down and then bury themselves in the mud, presumably with their eyes still able to search upward for any food that's floating across the surface. Okay, this is just another view that I thought you might enjoy. A little bit more to the southeast from where we were looking before when we panned. Again, notice the plateaus. Notice even as we look at these buttes ahead of us that there is a plateau at the base of it, indicating probably different time periods of uplifting and of erosion. There are the mountains that we looked at back behind the plateaus. This may be one of the most unique abodes or housing arrangements that I've seen. This is a large remnant of a butte. But look at the base. This is the remnant of a butte with what may be one of the most novel housing arrangements I've ever seen. Look at the bottom and the front to that dark hole. Certainly appears to be man-made, man-carved, and might well have been an abode. Off to the left, you can just barely make it to see it to the left of that shadow, or to the where the shadow is. There's a windmill indicating a source of water. This was probably somebody's home. Imagine the hours it took to carve out that hole. But imagine the security you might feel, or fear. We're looking north-northeast at the La Salle Mountains. Notice also coming in from the left and over the top of us are cloud formations that have been there for a couple of days. And as you look at that curve, it almost makes you imagine, and you can see that curve going over the mountains, that this is a path that these clouds travel. And I'm led to think that it might have some relationship with the jet stream, which would have somewhat the same undulating curve, but I don't really know yet. It's early morning, and as I say, the sky cloud covered. There are 3 levels of the Canyonlands National Park. The first is the one that we are on right now, called Island in the Sky. And this height that we are at, millions of years ago, was merely a featureless plain that went completely south as far as the horizon at least. So we could have, in theory, in those days, walked continuously from here on level ground. Over the centuries, rainwater, the Colorado River and the Green River have cut out all of this massive material that is missing from the flat plain that should have been straight ahead of us. Consider the awesome volume of material moved out of here by this rainwater and river water, and it gives you some hint as to the conception of millions and millions of years of time. The relationship between the removal of material and the length of time. It's difficult for human beings, if not impossible, to comprehend time. Perhaps this is one medium for doing so. The second layer is the white rim, and that refers, as you can see down below, and we'll come a little closer to it, to the limestone that you see there that has the appearance of white versus all of the rest of the limestone, or correction, sandstone, which is red. The white rim sandstone, which is what that's called, is a very hard sandstone, and as a consequence, it breaks down most difficultly. Excuse the English. It's the hardest to break down, and as a consequence, everything else wears away first, and that is what has caused the erosion of these canyons. And much deeper canyon than the one we see here. Look just beyond, and you'll see the Colorado Rivers down beneath in the bottom of that canyon. So there are several levels of canyon that have been created over the course of time. It's interesting to note, although not terribly unusual, but as we look out over the landscape, the park has created its own weather systems in various parts. Notice that long bank of clouds. Whether that's following the river, I don't really know. As we look farther over, there's still farther out onto the horizon more cloud banks. Another point of interest, and I'll pan down back over towards the northeast, but you'll see a road there, and it travels all along here. And if you and your parents or friends are ever interested in what I imagine must be a rather unique experience, is that you can come out here and ride in your vehicles this white rim road, on the white rim trail they call it. And it goes for about 104 miles one way. There's no way out other than the way you came in, so in essence you're looking at a 200-mile trip, normally done of course with four-wheel drive vehicles. There, over there and about the center of the picture is the Needles area, southern portion of the park. This is Buck's Canyon. Imagine having a place this spectacular named after you, and you having such a simple name as Buck. There's a look down the canyon, the LaSalle Mountains in the background. Let's focus down inside that canyon. This is